Hello, you wonderful people. I kind of want to do something special, considering the fact is that Orphan Black series finale is coming up. It's actually going to be airing tomorrow by the time you see this. I just wanted to kind of take this time to kind of gush over Orphan Black a little bit and just talk about some of my favorite moments. I mean, even then it's going to also be me talking about some of my favorite reveals, storyline elements, character stuff, like just all over the place with it. Two notes I need to make. One, this will include spoilers, not just from like seasons 1, 2, 3. It's like, no, the entire series so far. So if you have not seen anything of the current season, you're just waiting for everything to be done and then watching, do not watch this video because there's some things on this list that will spoil season 5 for you. So don't do that. You've been warned. And the second thing to note is that these are not in any particular order. They're just, I listen them off as they are on my list. I think easily the first thing to talk about when it comes to this show as like kind of the best moments is I think it's episode 3 of the first season when you get revealed what this is all about, that you get introduced to the other clones. It's where Sarah meets Allison and Cosima and finds out, oh, we're all genetic clones. That might have been episode 2, I can't remember. But nevertheless, like, obviously that was a pivotal moment in the show because it tells you what the entire show is based around. And that was like one of the, I mean, obviously the show already gripped you with the first 2 episodes if it were that however many episodes had passed at the time before the reveal, I don't remember. But nevertheless, that moment was like, wait, what? This is about clones? Because I've talked about this in different formats, but the fact of the matter is that was my first introduction to what the show was about. I went into it not knowing anything about, I've seen like little bits here and there like teasing the show, but never really diving too deeply into what it was about. And so that came as a surprise to me. So easily being the first thing I talk about on this list. I mean, what I love so much about the clone aspect of this show, it helps separate the show from any other show in this regard. Not only just because of this, oh, how cool it is from a science fictional level, like, oh man, it's about clones, but also like the care that it comes from like the writers as well as the performances by Tatiana Maslany is like separating who the clones are. Yes, you're genetically the same, but personality wise you're very different. You have a rough and you have someone like Sarah who's very rough and tumble. You have Allison who's a very like type A, super uptight soccer mom, and you have Cosima, the like pothead scientist. It's like, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as calling her a biot. She loves to smoke weed, obviously. I guess you could argue she's almost like a cross between it, whatever the case may be. They're all very distinct and different, and I just think that's obviously one of the show's biggest selling points, like especially like, you know, someone who's a nut like me who loves characters and character developments. This is like the greatest show for that, just because you have so many different characters, and not even just the clones. You know, I focus heavily on the clones, but there's also like every other character in the show, as I've said in something else too. It's like, this has like a fantastic cast that I've loved from everyone, from the clones to just everyone that's involved in this whole situation. And kind of along those same lines, it's the reveal of the casters was a pretty big moment in the series too. I remember it being like season 2's finale is when that twist comes. It's like, oh wait, there's not just the female clones, the leaders, there are also the male clones, the casters. And I love because like the entire season you had like, you know, you got to know Mark. He's more part of the Polythians, and that was just, oh, he's just part of that. He runs off with Gracie, but then at the end you get revealed. It's like, I remember because it's a cut back and forth between Paul leaving with Helena and Sarah kind of meeting the quote-unquote new enemy, and it was just revealed like, oh wait, these are casters. Mark was a caster because, you know, it was a face that Sarah had seen before. So I just thought that was kind of a nice reveal. I really like that too, like the dynamic of there being 2 different clone sets like that, because it shows you it's kind of like an element that I've kind of recently talked about in the more recent episodes of this the current and final season, is that the whole nature versus nurture element that I feel like it's always been there in the show, but it, you know, you take the casters and the leaders and they're the best example of it, because like, yes, the leaders were monitored and always kept in like certain conditions to see like, oh, what they would fit, like how they would react and develop under said conditions, but they had a very different upbringing than like the casters. The casters were bred as military boys to be trained and used as weapon, whereas the leaders were just kind of left to their own devices to lead their own lives. Yes, they were both experiments, but it's a situation where I feel like a little more nurture was given towards the leaders and a lot more nature was given towards the casters. At least that's how I've always looked at it. I mean, when you actually break it down, it's kind of like a yin-yang situation where there's a little bit of both. There's a little nature and nurture with the leaders and a little nature and nurture with the casters. I mean, to some degree, you could argue there's an element of that with Cody, especially like obviously when the most recent season, when like her caring so much about like John, you know, aka PT Westmoreland, telling her like, yep, get rid of Mark, and her almost being sad about it. Not almost, outright being sad about it. Another favorite moment of mine has to be Evie's betrayal, because I love that whole situation, because you have the situation of Susan being like, okay, give me some of Kendall's genes and we'll save the Litas, but we won't the casters, because, you know, Sarah was like, we can't have the casters around because of their whole virus thing, and that could be weaponized and everything. Susan made that compromise, willing to save the Litas but not the casters. Obviously Ira wasn't always all for that, considering the fact is him and Susan had the relationship, but I just thought that was a powerful moment of Evie, you know, doing what she did. Like, not only was that the moment Kendall was killed, you know, taking away at that point in time the only means for finding a cure for Cosima, because at the time, like, Cosima was the only one who had really, you know, obviously there were other Litas who had suffered before her, but within the confines of the story that we got to know, she was the first one. Obviously later on MK actually shows symptoms and ends up getting sick. It's actually kind of interesting. I'm surprised that never actually came up with any of the others. Like, none of the others actually got sick. Like, it was only Cosima amongst the main group that ever got sick. I just think that's kind of interesting. Even up to this point, she was the only one that ever got sick. Like I said, with the exception of MK. But not only was that a moment of just like Evie being like, yeah, this whole clone project, it's over. The fact of the matter is my way of handling things, you know, Neolution and everything, like, it's superior, and just like, it's like, once again, it's one of those situations where I love when you meet a bad guy and you don't realize it. I love when a bad guy kind of reveals himself. It's like, oh, you thought she was just some person in the background. It's like, no, she was kind of set up to be the main antagonist of the season. And just that moment, and what that also meant for S's, Siobhan, and Sarah's relationship, because, you know, Sarah made that decision and that move behind S's back. I mean, it was for Cosima's sake, but it's like she did it without telling S. I mean, it's actually, you know, obviously it's it reflects the whole Helena situation, because like S made that decision behind Sarah's back, but it put a bit of a wedge between them, because it's like, you know, Siobhan blamed Sarah, but ultimately she realized it's like, no, that wasn't Sarah's fault. She couldn't have seen that coming, and it's just, they did kind of find their way back to each other and kind of found middle ground again. So it was just kind of impactful, because what Kendall's death also meant for them is like, because like, especially for Cosima, it was such a big part for her as well as the others, because it's like, we get to meet where we came from, and it's like, to a certain level, it also deepened the bond between S and Sarah, because it's like, technically they were related, because, you know, Kendall being Siobhan's mom, and then it's like, holy crap, like, we come from Kendall, so that means technically the Litas and S are related. And kind of along that same line was in season 4, was the whole divide between Sarah and Felix. I thought that was kind of an interesting development for his character, because, you know, for Felix, he always felt like the outsider, especially when it gets revealed like, oh man, you're related to S, like, all this is about you. You know, I mean, obviously that was revealed back in season 3, but it's just like, this is all about you. You know, from the very beginning, like, Felix kind of felt like he didn't have a place in all of this, which he does. Like, I mean, he kind of acted as a mediator. He helped a lot of people, specifically Allison, because if it wasn't for Felix, Allison probably wouldn't have made it through a lot of the situations she had to deal with. The whole Donnie situation, the whole Ainsley situation, her stressing herself out, the drinking and the medication, like, you know, he was there for that. But for him, it's just like, you know, this is my family, sure, but I need to find out where I came from. This is all about Sarah finding out where she came from. Why can't I do the same? And her meeting Adele, and just the rift that it caused between him and Sarah. And I just thought that was kind of an interesting development for his character, showing like, you know, there's more to Felix than just being like a sidekick in this whole situation. He's got his own story to tell. He's got his own shit to deal with, you know? Another big part in this series for me, I think, would have to be Sarah and Helena's relationship, because it's like there's been so many ups and downs, wanting to kill each other, hating each other, but then loving each other because of their bond and their connection. There were always ups and downs, and it's so interesting when you see them from the very beginning to where they were to where they are now, like Helena pregnant, literally about to pop. Because even more so when you think about the fact is from the very beginning, the moment they locked eyes, Helena was like, you know, at that point, Helena had already killed a lot of clones, but it was like something about Sarah from the very beginning. She felt that connection, and it took a while, but eventually Sarah felt it too. And it's just like, out of any of the leaders, I love like their relationship the best just because of how it's developed. Like, obviously she's always been at odds with some of the others, like, you know, Allison and Kasim, and definitely Rachel, but it's a situation of like, there's something special about that relationship, them being even more related than the others. I just thought that's kind of a bond only they have amongst the leaders, so it makes it special. Another favorite moment of mine would have to be the moment Donnie and Allison opened up to each other about the bad stuff they had done. Allison about the whole Ainsley situation and Donnie about the Leaky situation. And it was just that beautiful moment of just like, to me, that was a concrete moment where I was like, at this point in time, we introduced Donnie and Allison as kind of the fuck-ups of the team. That the fact of the matter is, like, constantly throughout the rest of the series, they're always getting into stuff, drug dealing, Donnie getting arrested, them kind of being black, like, it's just, there's always something with them, and I just thought that was just kind of like, that to me was like the beginning of that. Obviously there was much more before that, like the whole Allison suspecting Donnie and there being a rift between the relationship. It's like Donnie getting like revealed to him, like the whole clone situation, like, because obviously he was a monitor, but you know, the monitors, it was a double blind situation of like, oh, none of the monitors knew that they were what they were monitoring the subjects for. And so, you know, he saw how much it hurt Allison, and it's like, this is my wife, I've been a shitty husband, and he wanted to make it up to her. And just that moment of them handling that situation, like, oh yeah, let's bury Leaky in the garage. And literally after they finished burying him, literally having sex like a couple feet away from him on top of the freezer. Yeah, easily, I have said this also too, Donnie and Allison are probably my favorite couple in the show, just because they are the mess ups, because they just of how like crazy their stories are. It's never like, their stories end up like obviously coincide with the main plot line a lot of times, but at the same time it's like they got their own stuff to deal with, but at the same time that stuff, when they're like doing their own thing, like for example selling drugs, it ends up interfering with the main plot line when things kind of go full circle and come back and bites them in the ass essentially. So probably another, and this, you know, I'm using an example of something a lot more recent, it's a situation in season 5 where we have Rachel literally cutting her eye out. It's, as someone who can't handle eye stuff, that was both like amazing yet horrifying at the same time. I feel so bad for Rachel. It's like always something's happening to her eye. At least in this particular situation, she did it herself, because that moment personified everything Rachel was feeling at that moment. Because Rachel, in this season, she felt on top of the world. She found her purpose. She felt important again. She felt like, oh, this is what I'm made for. It's like P.T. Westmoreland, but then she kind of felt like found out it was all a lie. She thought she had gained her freedom. She, you know, because she'd always thought of herself as special, but in this moment, in this episode, it all came crashing down. That foundation of feeling special, to feeling important, you know, came collapsing upon her. And to me, I've always said that that's the reason why she's always hated Sarah the most, is because like Sarah is one of the only leaders who can get pregnant and have a child, something Rachel could never have. And that's why I think she always had a bit of an attachment to Kira, especially like when it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna keep Kira, you know, your family will be, you know, Kira will be okay, we're just gonna run some tests on her, stuff like that. To me, you know, Rachel, I always saw it as like, she's like, oh, I can do this, no problem. It's like, I think on some level, you know, if she didn't care about Kira, she wouldn't have given her back like she did. So like, there's some part of her that did care for her, you know, so. But that moment of cutting her eye out is like cutting the chains that Westmoreland, or rather John, had around her neck, you know, the whole recording her the entire time. Like, it personified the fact is that she wasn't free. She had this, you know, the illusion of freedom was there, and now like, you know, that was a moment of her cutting herself free, making her own decisions. Obviously, even before that, you know, she covered her eye with the eye patch and helped Sarah get Kira back. So my next thing is not necessarily, I guess you could call it moments. It's just the character Crystal. Everyone's got to love Crystal. For the fact of the matter is, she's such an airhead, yet she somehow manages to figure everything out before everyone else does. The fact is, she gets things a little bit wrong. She's thinking like, oh, this has something to do with cosmetics, but it's like, oh yeah, she's like totally not believing the whole like, oh, human cloning thing, because it's like, there's no way you know, that whole conversation between her and Sarah being like, there's no way we look alike. I mean, we're totally different. Like, I'm so much prettier than you. And it just the fact is that she always just happened to stumble, and that's literally conversations. Even Sarah's like, how the hell does Crystal keep figuring shit out? How does she do this? And to me, that's just why Crystal easily found a way in my heart, just because of her approach and just her way of just stumbling across things. Next thing I want to talk about is MK. I appreciated MK's character because it seemed like MK was just gonna be like, oh, a behind the scenes hacker that would help them out. Because like MK is one of the few, along with Crystal, one of the few leaders that we've seen kind of stick around. So other leaders, like Tony, for example, you got introduced to, but they were kind of on their way. But it's just like MK was a character that you got to know a little bit more about her past, especially her connection to Ferdinand. And the fact of the matter is of how her story went. Her trying to kill Ferdinand, and granted she like just stole his money and ran, because for her it's just like she wanted revenge against the men that took everything from her, the people she held close, her best friends, the whole Helsinki situation. So it's like that was just kind of an interesting development in her story, and to have her leave, but eventually she came back, partially because she was sick, so there's that element. So because even the group was like, okay, why is MK back now, what does she want? But the fact of the matter is she did what she could to help. I mean, because truth be told is she didn't want to get even Sarah deeply involved in this whole situation. It's like she was connected to Beth and found out why Beth killed herself, and the fact of the matter is she didn't want another one of her sisters to go through that. So it's like, stop trying to learn the truth, the whole Neolution thing, and just move on. Just don't get too deep into this. Wanted to protect them, but even then, like, even after everything, she was like, thank you for letting me come back, and trusting me again. Even in that same moment, she also, sacrifices herself for Sarah. It's like, okay, Sarah, you go ahead, and she bought some time, and it was just like, that was the moment. It's one of those heart-wrenching moments of like, here's a character dying. Like, amongst a group that we've only experienced that 3-4 times, there was the somewhat ambiguous death of Delphine, Paul's death, Kendall's death, and now MK's death, and it was in such a brutal way too. That's what makes that situation even sadder. But it's just like, because she felt like she didn't have much time anyway, so she wanted to do what she could, for one, just to stop Ferdinand because of who Ferdinand is, and then on top of that, buy Sarah some time. And just, I don't know, that's why I feel like MK deserves a little bit of the spotlight too. So next thing I want to talk about is season 4's premiere. Specifically, this is the episode where we kind of got to know a little more about Beth. Season 1, we learned some stuff here and there about Beth, but season 4 was when we really dived into like what, I mean, granted at the time, it took the rest of the season for us to really find out what pushed her, what events led to her deciding to kill herself. What truth was so powerful that she felt the need to kill herself. I mean, ultimately we find out like the reason why she killed herself was in order to protect the other leaders. It's like knowing what she knows, if she died, it meant the others would be oblivious and they wouldn't have to pay the price for it. So getting those moments of seeing that her last days, seeing it through those recordings, her finding out about Paul, like the fact is that he was monitoring, and along with finding out the truth about Paul, and the fact is that he was her monitor, and just what that pushed him to do, because it's like she loved Paul, but it's like Paul never loved her. So, and also what that meant for both Art as well as Sarah, because like looking at the recordings, obviously Sarah's seeing Paul, but Art's also seeing Beth, and just like how much that's pulling at their heartstrings, because it's like here's a reminder of the people that we loved and we lost. I mean, because the episode's even more like, there's even more an extra layer of sadness to it, because at the same time we all know like Beth was kind of unraveling. She was taking drugs and stuff and just trying to like deal with everything. Like, it's kind of a similar situation that recently in the recent episode, Cassima and Allison kind of talked about the fact is that Sarah has to be strong. She's always has to be strong, and it's kind of a situation similar to that where Beth had to be strong. It's like, Sarah had to take over for Beth. Beth acted as a glue to this whole situation until that role fell into Sarah the moment she started impersonating Beth. So another favorite moment of mine is when Allison, when Siobhan, when it's revealed to Siobhan that clones are a thing, and she meets Allison, like Allison besides Sarah, and what that means, because I love the situation of it being like, she's like, I knew something was off the last time you were here. Look at you. Oh, you went to college and everything. And did you have Sarah being like, gosh, like, shut up. Because previously Allison had dressed up as Sarah and disguised herself as Sarah for the purposes of being able to spend time with Kira. And I also appreciate that moment of like Kira being like easy to be able to tell, I know you're not my mom, and just like, oh, freaking out, but it's like, okay, your mom is helping us out. And in fact, this Kira played along with it too, because she knew her mom was doing something like important to help some other people. So I just thought that was kind of a beautiful moment. I mean, truth be told, that same moment applies to everyone when everyone finds out the truth about clones. It's fantastic. Just the reactions all around. I mean, kind of along those same lines is, I love the fact is that there's constantly the storyline of like everyone pretending to be someone else. Like Allison, Cosima had to pretend to be Allison at one point. Sarah had to pretend to be her at one point. Obviously, I just mentioned Allison pretended to be Sarah. Sarah had to pretend to be Cosima at one point. Helena disguised herself as Sarah and ended up killing their mom. That wasn't as a not a high point, but along the same lines, you had Sarah pretending to be Rachel. She's done it twice now. I think she's also done Crystal twice. I think she only was able to like go through with it one time, because in the most recent season, like when Crystal popped up in this current season, she was going to impersonate her, but Crystal was like, nah, I got this, and handled it herself. So another relationship I want to talk about that I really like in this show is Delphine and Cosima. It is a very, very complicated relationship that, much like Donnie and Allison, has its ups and downs, and much like just the same, like, aspect of like, well, the fact is that it has ups and downs like Helena and Sarah's relationship. But it's like, because the fact of the matter is, Cosima from the very beginning was like, Delphine's most likely my monitor. I've kind of figured that out. But the fact is, they quickly develop feelings for each other, and then Cosima kind of gets caught up in it, and then to a point she's like, well, no, Delphine would never hurt me and never manipulate or use me. But then she found out Delphine went through her files and everything, and it broke that trust. But they built it back up because Delphine was like, everything she did was for Cosima's sake. It wasn't always clear cut. The fact of the matter is, it didn't always seem that way, but everything she ever did was because she was concerned for Cosima. And like, she took on the burden of like loving Cosima, which means that she would have to love all her sisters too. It's kind of something Donnie has, had to get associated with as well. Especially season 3, they really had their kind of falling out when, it's like, oh, can we trust Delphine? I don't think we can. You have like them trying to distance themselves because it's like, we got to be professional about this. Like, we can't have this relationship interfere. Now that at that time, Delphine had taken over Dyad, and I forgot her name. It's the actress. I forgot her character's name, but it's also, she's the actress who played Kinsey in Lost Girl when her and Cosima started dating. Obviously, you had Delphine acting quote unquote jealous. But, it's bits of jealousy, but at the same time, I was also concerned, but it turns out it wasn't, because it's like, oh, we think it's her leaking information the entire time, when in actuality, it was Gracie and that whole thing. But even then, there were still those feelings, and it's still there even in this season, because obviously, like, everything Delphine has continued to do, any secrets that were being kept, like working with Ferdinand and Rachel, was all for the purpose of helping the others and Cosima. So you deal with the devil, dealing with the devil, to help the people that you love type of situation. And I think ultimately, it seems like definitely like Cosima and Delphine are at that spot right now where everything is good, and like, the series is closing. So hopefully when it's all said and done, they will be together. Like, hopefully nothing else, no more clone business will get in their way. So we'll have to see though. This is another moment from this current season. It's actually from, by the time you're watching this, the week before last. It's episode 8. It was basically the art show, and I loved Felix's art show, not only just because it was just a beautiful thing. I'm not much of an art person. Art is a lot of abstract thought and just like, oh, making your own interpretations about something. But it was such a beautiful show of what it represented. Obviously using Sarah, well, the Litas, to represent the different, like, it's like, oh, look at these dual sides of my sisters. Like, oh, here's this side of her, which is actually Allison, and this side of her, which is actually Cosima, and this side, it's my sister. So I just love that aspect, but also the final aspect of it being like, hey, the whole bringing the conversation of nature versus nurture. Because the fact of the matter is, S took in orphans, him and Sarah, and the fact of the matter is, that's a bit of nature, because who's to say where they would have been or who they would have been if it wasn't S who brought them in. And obviously he's got his biological sister Adele in his life, and it's just like the beautifulness that is his family, and they're lucky to be who they are, that nature, and nurture combined together to, because of nurture, they ended up being who they are, you know, and they had this family. It was just kind of a, I don't know, it was such a beautiful moment, and it just encapsulated, you know, so much of the series in that one moment. Kind of along those same lines as we have the next powerful moment that literally took place after the art show, and that is S's death. The fact is that, you know, it's nearing the end of the series. It's literally episode 8, 2 episodes left, and they kill off, you know, Sarah and Felix's mom. She's been their rock their entire lives. Yes, there's been ups and downs between them, but it's like those are her little chickens, and like she's essentially their mama bird. And it's just, the fact of the matter is, Siobhan had planned everything out. She wrote a letter, she had gun stashed it, because she had a feeling like the Ferdinand situation was going to end the way it did, that she knew there was a good chance she wasn't coming out of this. But, you know, to protect the people that she loved, she was willing to do anything. Kind of along the same lines of Delphine, working with Ferdinand and Rachel, work with the devils you know to protect the people you love. So easily like a very soul-crushing moment, because especially because that's how the episode ended, was with her sacrifice. And there's like that part of me, I said it at the time when I was talking through the episode, I knew she was gone, but there was that part of me that was hoping maybe the next episode she could be okay. Turned out not to be the case, sadly. So easily makes her way into the spot of just like doing what she's done, you know, not even just then, but everything she's ever done throughout the course of this series. Like, yes, S has had her secrets and stuff like that, but she has done nothing but trying to protect. She's looked after Kira even through, you know, when Sarah was having her troubles well before the series. But even then, it's like S has just done so much for a lot of people, and it's something that, you know, I think even Allison and Cosima can kind of comment on, because even they wouldn't be where they are right now. Like, none of, like, a lot of this would have been possible if it wasn't for S, you know. So next person on the list, I've actually talked about him a couple times throughout this video, is Paul. I love the twist on Paul's character, because it's like, okay, you're thinking Paul at first is like, obviously you never know whether to trust Paul or not constantly throughout the series. But the fact of the matter is, it does seem on some occasion he does have Sarah's best interest at heart, and he is always trying to help her out. It's like, oh, but he's being forced by Dyad because they have dirt on him about his whole military history. But then you get the twist in season 2, it's like, oh, nope, he was actually undercover the entire time, you know, for Cody, well, in the military, you know, and the whole Casper program. And I thought that was such a good, it added that layer of like, oh, do we trust Paul? Do we not? You know, and that was something Sarah constantly, like, you know, had conflictions about. But even when it came down to it, no matter what the circumstances, Paul did care for Sarah. You know, it wasn't always apparent, but everything he did, like, he tried to keep her out of it, tried to keep her protected in his own way. So ultimately, you know, dying to make sure that her and Helena got away. Next thing on the list is meeting Cal, Kira's dad. The whole circumstances around that, because it's just like, oh, this is some random place that Fee, Kira, and Sarah is staying in, and then it was revealed like, oh, someone lives here. Whoa, 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 what are we doing here? Wait a minute. And then having Kira be like, are you my dad? And he's just kind of laughing and looks at Sarah, and Sarah kind of looks at him and is like, wait, what? In that moment, kind of, because it was also kind of showing you like, something that throughout the rest of the series, Kira herself is constantly asking, like, what is so special about her? What's so important about her? This just gave her an opportunity to kind of get to see the flip side of herself. You know, she knows her mom, and now she got to meet her dad. You know, he's a very heartwarming guy, very smart, intellectual. The military took what he was working on, and they kind of weaponized it, and obviously he didn't want a part of that. So he was a rich genius with a heart of gold. And the fact of the matter is, even when it was all said and done, trying to help Sarah in whatever way he could. So even kind of like, hey, kind of run away with me, you know, you and Kira, we can just, me and her and you, we can just go. So sadly we have not subsequently seen Cal since season 3. Season 2, I should be actually correcting myself, I apologize about that. Season 2 is what I meant. Did he bump into season 3? I don't remember. I think it was only season 2. Nevertheless, once again, it's the series finale coming up, so there's always a possibility for him to make, like, you know, a small, you know, moment to return. So, and the next thing on our list is lovable douchebag Vic. Vic being just this like no-name character. Like, obviously he has a connection to Sarah in the beginning, but you're just kind of like, oh, he's just kind of getting mixed up in this, and he's going to screw up everything. You know, Sarah pretending she's dead, but he's running into Allison thinking it's Sarah. It's like, oh, you faked your death, which she did, but you know, it just complicates the whole thing. But the particular moment I'm talking about is Vic's return. It's like, oh, Allison's been put in rehab by Donnie, and you have, you know, her meeting Vic, and Vic's like acting like he's turned around and he's asking Allison like, hey, I'm here to help you, I'm here to listen. And he's, I mean, in his own twist, in a weird way, he actually helped Allison, but it kind of all goes down the drain when it's revealed, oh, he's actually working with Angela, trying to get any dirt about this whole situation. So what I love about that situation is like, he's like, okay, I get it, you're not Sarah, bring Sarah here so we can talk. And then afterwards, Felix had drugged his drink, so he ends up passing out and smashing his face on a table and just getting covered in glitter and stuff. And to see him kind of get dragged all over the place and just tossed around like a sack of potatoes, it was just a beautiful moment. And once again, it just kind of, it felt right when it came to like Vic the Dick. It just felt right, you know. I mean, because that moment also led to, you know, what I brought up earlier, the whole Donnie and Allison, the reveal of like the whole Lita situation, and that kind of eventually led to the relationship getting stronger. So I guess arguably you could say Vic has a helping hand in that, because that later on pushed Donnie to be like, hey, stay away from my family, you know, him kind of stepping up and be like, yo, this is my family, you stay the hell away from them. So it kind of, you know, adds to that. So thanks, Vic. In your own dickish way, you helped. And the final thing I want to talk on this list is another relationship, and that is Cosima and Scott. It is something I didn't even really ever make the comparison to, and maybe it's not the right comparison to make, but until I started making this list, I was like, oh yeah, Cosima and Scott are kind of like Frankenstein and Igor. Once again, I know it's probably not the best comparison, but the fact of the matter is, I mean, because you could always tell, like, Scott had, like, from the very beginning, like, from season 1, Scott always kind of had a thing for Cosima, but then finding out, like, I've always looked at it as, like, oh, he didn't know she was gay until she started dating Delphine, but even then, that didn't change anything. He was still her friend, helping her out and everything, and I love the fact is that they had the working relationship they have now because Delphine, like, brought him in on it, because obviously he had seen the samples, because obviously Cosima had hidden him, like what they were really representing and stuff like that. And Scott's like, oh, I'm gonna work here at Dyad with you. She's like, nope, go ahead, go back, because she didn't want to get someone that she cared about, her good friend, mixed up in all of this. But then you have Scott being like, I know about the clones, and they turn around, he's like, yeah, I looked at all this stuff, I know about this, has something to do with cloning. Granted, at the time he didn't know like about the leaders that was specifically about Cosima, but then later on they had that moment, Cosima being like, hey, I'm the person that you're looking into, and he's like, well, it's very nice to meet you, and just that mutual thing of like, don't worry, you know, clone or no clone, I got your back, we're gonna find a way to cure you. And just that strong partnership that they've kept to this moment of just, you know, being the science dweebs of the show, and just all the stuff that they've accomplished together, you know. I don't know, I think that's like a true testament of friendship, you know. So yay, friendship. Kind of get all sappy and stuff about it. So like I said, that was the last thing on my list. There's so much more I could have talked about, but this video is already ridiculously long. I'm sure, you know, I don't know how much I'm actually going to cut out. I might cut a lot out, might not. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. My question to you guys is, let me know some of your favorite moments from Orphan Black. You know, you can discuss some of the stuff I brought up. You can discuss stuff like, oh my God, Michael, you idiot, how did you forget about this? You should have said this, and this. So let me know your thoughts about just Orphan Black in general, and just go nuts in the comment section about talking about it and stuff like that. Once again, this is a spoiler video and everything, so it's like go spoiler crazy if you feel the need to. So I am upset with myself for not watching this show as long as I have. I've mentioned it before, but around the time I originally started watching the show from the very beginning, it was roughly around its second season by the time I started. It was partway through its second season, in fact. And you know, I watched the first season, loved it, got about halfway through season 2, but didn't stop, got caught up in other stuff, and didn't swing back around to it until around season 4. So I was like, okay, this is the perfect time to get back into it. Watch season 1 all over again, still loved it, even knowing where the twists were. Watch season 2, the half of it I'd already seen and the other half I hadn't, and then also all of season 3 that was new to me, and immediately was like, why didn't I watch this sooner? I felt like such an asshole, but because Orphan Black is such a fantastic show. I cannot praise this show enough. And so I just wish I'd been watching it the entire time. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, like, as long as you're aware of a show and how awesome it is, then I guess that's all that matters, you know? So all I want to say is, to everyone associated with this show, I wish them the best. Thank you for bringing this show to my life, easily being one of my like top favorite like science fictional shows of all time. And I've already talked about like me never always being a big science fictional fan, so that means a lot. So I wish the best to everyone associated from the show, everyone associated with the show, from the actors, the writers, the creators, everyone, you know, that works behind the scenes, you know, just everyone. I wish them the best of luck in their future endeavors. And so I guess that's it. I'll be seeing you guys when I watch the series finale and kind of tell you my thoughts about it. I'll probably kind of reiterate more of this in that too, but I felt like also putting this here as well. So, but really that's all I want to talk about. And the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.